Fargo folks, and we're kicking off our conversation today here on the Fallon Forum, broadcasting live from the cultural and culinary crossroads of America, right here in downtown Des Moines in the Skywalk. I want to thank the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, also Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action for being our organizational partners in this pioneering broadcast effort. I want to thank my business supporters, and particularly sponsoring this segment of the show, Gateway Marketing Cafe. Gateway is a 20th and Woodland and a great grocery store, as you know, because I say it every day. Great grocery store, great cafe, and also a fantastic catering service. I want to thank a few of our other business sponsors, including Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling. Yep, you got an AC unit that looks like it may not be working for the hot weather coming up? Give Tinker a shout at 371-2114. I also want to remind you to check out the fantastic menu at Hawk Restaurant. Again, not just a great menu, but we're looking at 90% of the food they serve coming from Iowa farms. How incredible is that? Hawk, it's H-O-Q, by the way, not like Hawkeye, H-O-Q. They're at East 5th and Walnut in the East Village neighborhood. And finally, when you're done eating and getting your AC unit fixed and shopping for groceries, of course, you're going to want to tune your piano or have it moved. If you need a piano moved, folks, go to S&P Piano. They will move that piano anywhere in the country. They've moved mine so many times, they've stopped liking me. Anyway, you can find out more about them on my website, fallonforum.com. Of course, you can also listen to the show on fallonforum.com. Pretty much you can get all of your needs satisfied on my website. Well, maybe not all of your needs. You can also express your needs, your opinions, your comments, your critique of this conversation here at 244-0077 or 855-244-0077. Everybody is welcome to call in, even Frank from Des Moines. And be warned that if Frank from Des Moines is the only one to call in, then you may have to listen to what he has to say to whatever my guests want to add to this conversation. And speaking of guests, we have 4 distinguished participants in today's conversation. Actually, we have 2 conversations. The second conversation is going to be about nuclear power. We're basically reading an obituary on the proposed nuclear power plant that Mid-American wanted to build here in Iowa. Jim LaRue, an attorney, is going to join us for that conversation. Also, another attorney, Wally Taylor from Cedar Rapids. He's an attorney with the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. And finally, John Rocca with the Physicians for Social Responsibility. But first, we're going to look at a totally different issue. We're going to look at the issue of immigration, specifically a big event coming up here in Des Moines to call attention to legislation moving through the U.S. Congress. Joining me now with LULAC is Mitch Henry. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate the inviting me to your show today.
We've welcomed each other. That's cool. LULAC. What does LULAC stand for?
A League of United Latin American Citizens.
League of United Latin American Citizens.
Yes.
And you are collaborating with other organizations on an event this weekend that is turning out to be a pretty significant event with an ambitious agenda.
Correct. We have 18 other co-sponsors of the event this weekend on Saturday, June 15th. And the Walk for Immigration Reform Now will start at 1 o'clock and go to 3 o'clock.
Walk for Immigration Reform Now.
Yes.
And this is coinciding with activity at the congressional level.
Yes.
Again, as often happens, there were initially, I think, some more warm and fuzzy bipartisan feelings about the prospects for actually getting something done on this issue. And now it looks like the wheels on that bus might be falling off a little bit. What do you think?
Well, I would say in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, things look good. I mean, they're already taking votes this week.
But they went in committee this week, didn't they?
Pardon?
Do they have one in committee this week already?
Yes,
yep.
Yes. And now the issue is on the House side. So once we get to the U.S. House, I mean, that could be a different story.
So tell us about what we've seen pass through the U.S. Senate already.
Well, I think you just for the eligibility to vote in the Senate, I mean, the closure. So, I mean, you've had the votes over the last few days. So what I guess the group, you got the Gang of Eight and others are trying to prevent is...
What is the Gang of Eight?
Well, you got Democrats and Republicans that are supportive of the bill.
4 of each.
Yes.
It's not the kind of gang that's going to beat you up in the alley. It's the kind of gang you want on your side.
It's a good gang.
Okay, good gang. All right. And a bipartisan one for that.
A bipartisan one. So, I mean, they're trying to, help prevent the bill from being amended to death, so they're trying to prevent as few amendments as possible, including from our own U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley.
I mean, amendments are designed ideally to improve legislation,
yes.
But as we all know, the amendment process can be abused with the intent of trying to derail legislation.
Yeah, I mean, you have some U.S. senators out there, like including Grassley, are trying to, again, they're trying to improve the, I guess, border security.
You're putting the word improve in quotes there, I assume?
Yeah, I mean,
improve the bill?
To the point where, I mean, the bill will be so watered down at the end. I mean, it'll mean nothing. I mean, where it may take you 20, 25 years to become a citizen of the United States, already with this bill, it's going to take up to 13 years.
So what exactly, I mean, again, compromise is the nature of this kind of bipartisan wrangling. So what are we looking at right now in terms of this bill's focus?
Well, I think you're looking at, fair immigration reform. I mean, where it's going to take you, over 10 years to become a citizen.
So right now it takes longer, but it would still, under the bill, they're improving the timeline, streamlining the process. It would take you 10 years. Yeah, and I think to become a citizen.
Well, I think the key thing for us, I mean, is unifying the families, and where you're not leaving out the parents and the children, you're not separating them. The timeline there. I mean, it does speed up the process. Like let's say you're a student in the United States. Let's say you're a student in Iowa. Mm-hmm. Attending Iowa State or the University of Iowa, you're a so-called dreamer.
Now that's specific, not any student, but specifically those who came here as children.
Yes.
With parents who may have immigrated illegally.
They were,
okay.
Yes. So it's just, they were not born in the United States.
But they didn't come here by choice.
But they came here young, at a very young age, for the most part. A lot of them, over 10 years ago.
So and we know that Obama's executive order earlier this year, actually last year, I think, it was recently at any rate.
Well, it was revised. It was revised earlier this year, back in February, where it would grant them driver's license to drive in the state of Iowa.
Or nationally?
Well, not in every state, but in many states.
All right.
I mean, each state defines that.
Oh, sure. Okay, right.
Each state defines that differently.
His executive order affected the entire country, but differently based on various state provisions, okay?
But right now in the state of Iowa, students who are so-called dreamers are eligible to attend a state university.
Okay, and does this codify some of those changes that took effect in Obama's executive order?
Well, yes, right. And it just, and again, each state is different in the way they approach this.
Okay. So again, it's no secret to anybody who's been following the news that Senator Grassley has been, to put it mildly, an obstacle to any kind of bipartisan effort. Is he coming around at all? Is he just so stuck on a bigger fence, more border security, that he can't see the other essential provisions that have to move on?
Well, the vote just 3 days ago, I mean, he was one of just 12 U.S. senators to vote no, and so we're
vote no on what again? On
I mean, just to move the bill on to the next level, so it could come to the vote,
come to the full floor,
full floor in the U.S. Senate.
Right.
I mean, there'll be other measures, especially when it gets to the House side. I mean, you have people like Congressman King. I mean, he'll do anything to defeat any immigration bill. It probably doesn't matter how watered down it is for Congressman King.
Well,
until it's underwater.
There you go. That's a good sound clip right there. Sure. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously, we obviously know where he's at on this, but it is good to see people coming forward from both sides of the aisle. But now where again, the rally coming up this weekend is 1 o'clock at the state capitol building, right?
Well, no, it'll actually start in the Latino corridor, which is just east of the state capitol a bit. So it's between where we're going to start is at 1541 East Grand.
1541,
East Grand. So the old Rahul's restaurant, right there between East 15th and East 16th Street on East Grand. We'll start there at 1.
Is that the you call it the Latino corridor?
Latino corridor, yes. A lot of small Latino businesses.
You guys have your own corridor now?
Where's
the Irish corridor?
We've had it for a couple of years now.
Where's the Irish corridor? I want to know where that is.
Well, I believe that's in the Beaverdale area.
Oh, is it?
Yes, up there.
Well, you're probably right, actually. Okay.
A lot of Irish Catholics out there.
All right.
Yes. But with the Latino Catholics, we have that Latino corridor there.
You've got to.
So we'll go there. The walk is 1.8 miles. We'll go down Grand going west, then we'll turn going south on southeast 6th Street up to southeast Scott, and then we'll turn there and go down like 3 blocks toward the corner of southeast 9th and Scott. Will actually be set up at the ending for the speakers. Will be right next to the Guadalupe Chapel.
Oh, sure.
And right across the street from the Hispanic Educational Resource Center, the HER.
Yep.
And so that's where we'll end. And we'll actually have speakers at both locations, but the majority of speakers will speak at the end.
Good.
Then we'll have music. It's free. We'll be passing out water, information, and we encourage everyone to attend. I was watching the weather last night and this morning. It's not supposed to rain during the walk. So between 1 and 3.
Do you promise that?
That is guaranteed.
Guarantee, really?
99% guarantee.
Really? Even meteorologists don't make that kind of a promise. Be careful, Mitch.
We've had some divine intervention here, too.
Well, I hope so. You're going to count on it to wager that much confidence anyway. So that's good.
We're expecting a very good turnout.
Yeah, 1 o'clock on Saturday,
yes.
Leaving from East 15th and Grand.
Yes.
And ending up at the park on East 9th and Scott.
Yes, that's actually a vacant area. I won't call it actually a park, but right next to Guadalupe.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. There's a water fountain there, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's unique, a unique water feature.
There used to be railroad tracks that they've removed them.
Yeah.
But,
all right, so I hope this gets Senator Grassley's attention. I hope Steve King and the rest of our congressional delegation are paying attention, and I hope we have a broad turnout of not just members of the Latino community, but folks who care about policy.
We have 19 different organizations involved in this, so
good.
We're hoping for an excellent.
That's very, very good. Okay. All right, Mitch. Well, thank you. And again, folks, if you want to join that event, do so. And hopefully, again, you've heard it from Mitch Henry himself. Compliments of his connections with the divine. 90 or 99%?
99%.
99% chance of good weather on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So.
Can't guarantee you before or after, but 1 and 3.
Right up to 1 o'clock. We're good. All right. All right, folks. Thank you, Mitch, and good luck with that. We're going to talk about immigration. We just did talk about immigration reform. We're going to talk about nuclear power. That's an issue we put a lot of attention on this program over the past several years. When this program was still on WOW 98.3, we talked about it extensively. There was a pretty impressive coalition formed to work to defeat MidAmerican Energy's proposed nuclear power plant. And you never know when any policy proposal is put out there. You never know whether it's going to come back in some form or another until the sponsor announces that it has pulled the plug on it. And that's what happened recently. Just last week, in fact, MidAmerican Energy announced that they were not moving forward with their proposed nuclear power plant. So with me to help write the obituary on today's program, we'll be talking with attorney Jim LaRue. We'll also talk with Cedar Rapids attorney Wally Taylor. And also we'll talk with John Rackow with the Physicians for Social Responsibility. I want to take a second again to thank Gateway Market for sponsoring this segment of our show and encourage you, if you believe in this alternative to right-wing radio, again, right-wing radio, that's really redundant. It's all right-wing on the radio. If you believe in what we're doing here, support the businesses that make it possible. Check out Gateway Market at 20th and Woodland. And speaking of Beaverdale and the Irish Quarter, as I now have learned it's called, in Beaverdale, Tally's Restaurant, Bar and Catering, a great restaurant owned by a fantastic individual, Robert Sanda. Check them out for lunch, supper, and a fantastic Sunday brunch. I also want to thank two of our Newton business supporters, Dan Kelly's Real Estate Business. If you've got property to sell or buy in Newton, or you just think it might be nice to live closer to a racetrack, give Dan Kelly a shout. Also, I want to thank Diana's Wedding Cakes, also out of Newton. And we finally have internal support for Diana's Wedding Cakes because my producer, Maddie, is getting her wedding cake from Diana's. Anyway, folks, we'll be back in just a few minutes and shifting gears to talk about nuclear power.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going, man.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back, folks. That's Mr. Babers Neighbors, and we're going into segment 2 of this program, brought to you by the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit. Yeah, sure, it would have made sense to have that organization sponsor the first segment as well, right? But Gateway Market, great business, and the IES is a great event. That's coming up on November 9th. I'll tell you more about that as we get through the program a little bit here. I want to thank a few more of my business supporters as well. Ritual Cafe at 13th and Locust. I love their tea, but I hear a lot of folks who love their coffee. I'm just not a coffee guy. They've also got great music, some happening tonight, in fact. Again, I want to remind you about Sargent's Garage. Sargent's is at 6th and College, just north of downtown. They've been servicing Fallon mobiles for a long, long time. They are well worth checking out. And I want to thank Sid's Catering. Sid's Catering is the brainchild of Sid Cohn. You can find out more online at Catering by Sid. And she doesn't cater just standard stuff. She does vegan stuff, vegetarian, all sorts of ethnic opportunities. She really is an amazing artist when it comes to preparing food. All right, we're going to talk nuclear power here. Big news last week with Mid-American pulling the plug on their proposed nuclear power plant, something many of us have been fighting for a long, long time. And we were fighting the odds. I mean, when Mid-American donates 70 grand to the most powerful person in the legislature, there's a really good chance that they're going to get what they want. Well, for some reason they didn't. And here to kind of do an analysis of what happened, we've got 3 great guests joining us, one after the other. Later in the program, John Rocco with Physicians for Social Responsibility. We'll also hear from Wally Taylor, an attorney who represents the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. But with me in the studio to kick it off is attorney Jim LaRue. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, Ed, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so there was an interesting coalition that formed on this. Environmental groups, energy-oriented organizations, and then you had the Association of Retired Persons, ARP, weighed in, and that made a big difference, I think. They highlighted the concerns that consumers had about the costs, and I think that may have got lost in some of the debate, but the cost shift was huge, and I think a big part of why this proposal never panned out.
Well, Ed, don't forget Walmart was in the mix, which is a very rare occurrence in Iowa, and I think was symbolic that this wasn't simply a reaction of residential consumers, but also involved savvy businesses who understood that this was a bad policy choice.
Tell me about the Walmart connection.
Well, it was a more quiet one, but they were a part of the mix in the legislature, and their lobbyist had registered against the bill. And I think
I never even knew that.
Well, it wasn't prominent, but when Walmart speaks, people listen, and I think it legitimized a lot of folks who otherwise felt that they had been marginalized by some of the statements made by the proponents of the bill. That is to say, I think a person can be against this kind of financing scheme without having had to make a final decision that nuclear power in all instances should not be advanced. There's, I think, a lot of openness in the minds of many Iowans and others that if a future design of a nuclear power reactor, probably not using fission and plutonium, but other fuels, maybe fusion, if could put together in a cost-effective way that made it competitive with renewables and others, are open to that kind of possibility.
Right.
But they don't see that as a part of the plans here. What they see is plans that are advanced by financiers who see a very capital-intensive way that ensures a greater profit and has clouded the vision of some of those in the energy community to put this ahead of the other alternatives. And I think that's what a lot of the resistance came from, that it wasn't a carte blanche rejection of nuclear power in all of its forms, but this is not the way to go if we're going to go forward with nuclear power.
And it wasn't just Walmart in terms of, I mean, there were other players in the business community, I presume, that also came out in opposition to it. And I presume, again, part of it is, I mean, a lot of the focus was on these 600,000 ratepayers, most of whom are residential. But there were some big players as well who use a lot of power who would have seen their rates go up. And I think that was probably
absolutely
a big part of it for others as well.
And the kind of scheme that this was, if adopted, would have set a very bad precedent in Iowa. What this involved as proposed, first the QIP proposal that died in the legislature, which would have allowed all of the advanced costs to have been borne by the consumers, whether or not a plant was built or not. A very dicey scheme.
To what, the tune of like $2 billion, perhaps? I mean, they never put a firm price tag on it.
Well, the problem is you can't put a price tag on it because once you adopt a scheme like that, the natural cost controls just evaporate.
Oh, right.
And this bill or this measure that was crushed last week by Mid-America's own admission that they were putting it away was a smaller part, but the financing was very similar. That is, they adopted in the 2010 legislative session a bill. Mm-hmm. Of course, Mid-America drew the bill, but the bill said the legislature is requiring Mid-America to do the following.
Right, they wrote the bill that...
what the requirement was that over a 3-year period, they could charge, in essence, a surtax on Mid-America ratepayers, which would be used by the express language of the bill to study the feasibility of creating a nuclear power plant in Iowa in what they called a carbon-constrained world. And so they were coming towards the end of the 3-year period, and the $15 million budget, which they didn't spend all of it, but they determined on their own 2 things which I thought were remarkable. One, that it's not feasible, but 2, they said there's no rush to do this. In fact, we might be cost benefited if we delayed a decision like this for years, which is contrary to the big rush 3 years ago. And they said we've got to move forward immediately without clear debate to adopt these schemes because, we need for our base load to have nuclear power.
So once they saw a personal financial advantage to slowing down, they were willing to go as slow as they possibly could.
Well, I think what they found, it was not financially feasible and it was not politically feasible. A lot of things happened since this bill passed in 2010. You had a meltdown of the Fukushima plant.
And power plants were failing. Plans to build power plants were failing miserably in Florida and where else?
Well, Georgia has had a hard time. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for the first time ever, I think, just turned down a nuclear power plant application in the state of Maryland. We had a nuclear power plant on our border over in Nebraska that was being flooded. I mean, you had one series after another where if the goal was to enhance public support of building more of this generation of nuclear power plants, Mid-America was put in a very difficult position. Or one could say it put itself in a very difficult position.
Well, the bottom line is nuclear power is not a cost-effective approach to generating electricity, and I guess from our point of view, the stars kind of came together on that at the right time to make that really clear in so many different ways.
Another way of expressing that, which I agree with what you just said, but another way of expressing it is that it's impossible to attract a sufficient amount of capital, and these are terribly capital-intensive projects, from Wall Street unless, one, you remove all of the risk. We have a legal regime at the federal level that removes most of the liability risk from nuclear power plant owners and operators. But second, unless you also heavily subsidize it, at which case, if you have all those in place, then you might attract Wall Street investors to do this. But if you don't create those kinds of incentives, then other alternatives become, by comparison, much more cost-effective considerations.
Folks, if you'd like to join the conversation, we're talking about nuclear power, specifically about Mid-American Energy's decision to pull the plug on their proposed new nuclear power plant. Jim LaRue, an attorney, is in the studio with me today. We're going to be talking with Wally Taylor shortly. He's an attorney from Cedar Rapids. And later in the program, John Rocca with Physicians for Social Responsibility, weighing in on the health aspects of this decision. Now, Jim, I got to ask, you were years ago, Iowa City, where you're from, the city of Iowa City proposed its own utility structure. What was it called? A municipal utility.
Right.
And that would have meant, I mean, right now, Iowa City, like Des Moines, is under Mid-American's, in Mid-American service area. And you were part of the group of people, the citizens, fighting really hard to get that accomplished. Yeah. Mid-American pulled out all the stops and defeated you.
It was a significant defeat, and I don't think a step forward in terms of best practices. Arguably, that kind of citizen push made Mid-American a better company in some ways. I think one thing to be clear, at least I believe this, I think Mid-American, as a utility company goes, is extremely well run. It's extremely savvy. It's very well financed, which makes this recent moment all the more remarkable.
Right.
And it gives us a chance, I think, to look at the Iowa landscape and say, when it's like a magician, when the trick works, you don't know how it happened. When it fails, then you begin to look at the mechanics. Yeah. And I think this moment leaves us in an interesting way an opportunity to see what are exposed here and what parts of the Iowa system are working well and which are not. One part that's not working well is that Mid-America is too powerful. We were, I think, a better state when we had 7 investor-owned utilities rather than now 2. Mid-America,
we did have 7 at one time.
It was within the last 20 years, and these all consolidated.
Right.
And what it means is they have a disproportionate amount of power with very little offsetting energy in Des Moines day in and day out. Now, in this case, consumers rose up and pushed back, and it worked. 2, I think that we show that there is a way to organize consumers when the cause is right. We haven't seen this kind of coalition be this effective. Yeah. Usually the people at AARP are good friends of mine, but usually they get focused on narrow issues. At least I perceive them to be that say if it's not good for an older person, we're not interested. This was something that was expressed in a broad, socially responsible way that I think people responded to.
So what did bring ARP into the conversation?
I'm not sure at the policy level why they chose this particular issue. One knew that their base, disproportionately when people get older are on fixed incomes. If they live in a home, they're going to have to pay their utility bill each month, no matter what it costs. And the outcomes of the types of course, we're talking now the CWIP program, the cost in purchase payments in advance of construction. This is where they killed that bill. Empirically, those states that had tried this approach, it was uniformly a disaster. That is, unmitigated costs, very few power plants actually online, and the consumers taking the hit. And I think AARP said, this isn't something that would be good for Iowa.
Right. Well, good. It's good information, Jim.
Let me share a couple of things because it's still active to the extent that people have an interest. Is what's still up in front of us with this particular bill, and it's this: Mid-American, by statute, still has to go forward and prove up the $5 million some that it spent on this feasibility study,
right?
And they have to show that they're reasonable and prudent expenditures. Let me give you an example of the kind of expenditures that are there, because if people are interested, they ought to be expressing themselves to the Utilities Board and say they ought not to be forced to pay these expenses.
So Mid-American might have to refund some of the money.
Yes, under the bill, they were authorized to collect in advance up to $15 million in ratepayer surcharges.
I thought it was more than that.
Now, it was $15 million for the study, for the feasibility study. Of that, they spent about $5 or $6 million. I haven't seen the final numbers, but it's roughly in that. And what they're saying is, we're great guys. We're going to refund the $9 million that we didn't spend, but we're holding you for the $5 million that we did spend. So here are the kinds of the kind of things.
I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around how that qualifies as being a great guy.
All right. Well, how about $44,000 that they spent on a public relations firm to go to some of these communities where they thought they might want to have a plant?
Fremont and Muscatine.
Those were the finalists, but those weren't the only ones that got the polling. How about money spent with another PR firm, $4,000, who could train Mid-American executives how to talk to the press about selling nuclear power? How about $450,000 for a feasibility study, not for a nuclear power plant, but for a natural gas power plant? There's a long list of expenditures here where I think a reasonable person could say, is this really what that bill authorized? If the bill said we're here to see whether or not it's feasible to build a nuclear power plant.
So that the issue of that $5 million in ratepayer money that should, by common sense, I think, go back to the ratepayers. That's still a live round. That's still something we're going to be hearing about.
That's still a live round, and I think this is an area when something blows up like this. When the utility company that pushed for the study, that collected the money from the ratepayers, comes to a final conclusion that there's no rush even to do this, then the question is, why should it not be the investors, Mr. Warren Buffett or others who own the company, why shouldn't they be the ones to have spent that $5 million? Let's get this money back into the hands of the ratepayers, and let's not do this kind of foolish advance payment for a feasibility study again.
Well, that's really good information. I was not aware of that. We're going to have to talk more about that, Jim, sometime. That's a live round we want to continue to track. Again, a smaller issue in the big scheme of this nuclear power plant, but something that, in terms of justice and fairness, ought to be continued to be monitored, and we should apply pressure where appropriate. We've been talking with Jim LaRue, folks. He's an attorney from Iowa City. He has a practice in both Iowa City and Des Moines. Used to serve in the Governor Culver administration.
Indeed.
You were the legal counsel and then also the chief of
I was
staff?
policy director, so I moved around some.
Yeah, right. Well, and we're going to keep talking about this, folks. There's other aspects to get into. Wally Taylor, also an attorney from Cedar Rapids, will join us shortly. And later in the program, Dr. John Rockow with Physicians for Social Responsibility. Again, I want to remind you to give a little word of thanks to the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit for supporting this segment of our show. That event is coming up on November 9th, and a great opportunity to learn how to grow, expand, or even get your business started. More information about that at ies.org. I want to thank Fighting Burrito, one of my other business supporters, with a great restaurant here in Des Moines, another in Ames, custom-made burritos for very affordable prices. Also, Story County Veterinary Clinic. That's Dr. Kim Holding's business, and she's on Highway 30 between Ames and Nevada. And I want to remind you about the upcoming $1 Million Marathon. That kicks off on June 21st on the West Coast, 160 consecutive marathons, a relay run of marathons coming through Des Moines on July, I think, 19th. I'll get the exact date for you there, but that's going to be raising money for cancer research. We'll be back in a few minutes, folks, on the Fallon Forum.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. The dawn of a new era begins. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back, everyone. That's Max Wellman, and we're going to continue our conversation on nuclear power in this segment of the Fallon Forum, sponsored by the $1 Million Marathon. Again, I want to thank our business supporters at Gateway Marketing Cafe, Hawk Restaurant in the East Village, and Max Wellman. Max Wellman's got some, always got some great performances, and also the Max Wellman Trio Songbook Project. Check that out online. If you want to call and join the conversation, 244-0077. Toll free, it's 855-244-0077. We're going to go to our phone lines here and welcome Wally Taylor to the program. Wally is calling us from, I believe, Cedar Rapids. Hello, Wally.
Ed, hi, how are you?
Good. Where's Wally? Cedar Rapids, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, good. And you are also, in addition to being a private practice attorney, you represent the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club on occasion.
On many occasions.
Many
yes.
occasions. Yeah, and we just talked about one of those occasions recently on this program regarding the lawsuit being thrown out by the Iowa Supreme Court relevant to two road project, or actually it was just the one road project in Cedar Rapids on Highway 100. So
right.
We'll need to have you back to talk about that someday too. I want to hear what happens next now that the Supreme Court has kind of slapped you down on that. But let's focus on it's victory time. I mean, we won a big one here, and we, as Jim LaRue pointed out, a pretty broad coalition. I didn't even realize that Walmart was part of that coalition. I don't know if me and Walmart have ever been on the same side of an issue before. But
I certainly haven't.
Okay, well, but hey, we'll take whatever. And politics is funny that way. You get into interesting coalitions, and I mean, ARP was a big part of that coalition. And as we talked with Jim about the cost issues, and also about the continuing efforts to get Mid-American to pay back the $5 million that they spent that really went nowhere. But that's another story. Your focus has been as an environmentalist with concerns about the nuclear power proposal from that point of view. So, again, from your point of view, why do you think this proposal was defeated with the environmental concerns in mind?
I don't think the environmental concerns were that important, unfortunately.
That's candid, unfortunate, but candid.
It was the financial aspect. As Jim pointed out, this bill that Mid-American was trying to ram through the legislature would have shifted all of the financial risk for the project, for the proposal, to the ratepayers, and allowed Mid-American to then go to financiers to get the money to build the plant. And nuclear power is so risky that financiers will not finance it unless the risk is shifted to someone else.
Yeah.
And that's what really did it. And that was why ARP got on the bandwagon, and others as well. But it's interesting. I think as more people became aware of the issue, I think they came to understand more why nuclear power is not the wave of the future, that it's dangerous. And the real problem environmentally with nuclear power is the radioactive waste.
Right, and that issue was brought into focus by the disaster in Fukushima, which again, from our point of view, might have been. I mean, it was a horrible tragedy, but also fortuitous timing.
Yeah, and the problem with nuclear waste is we don't have any place to put it, and we keep generating more and more all the time. And Congress and a Blue Ribbon Commission appointed by the president, others have been struggling trying to find out what to do with this nuclear waste. Right now, every bit of it is stored on site, first of all, in these cooling pools.
Right, and that's a challenge. Is keeping those pools cool enough is a challenge.
Yeah, and that's what happened at Fukushima. The power went out, and they couldn't keep the fuel pools cool. And then after they're in the pools a while, they put them in casks, they call it.
Right.
Although they don't bury them. But then they stay there right on site. And people who are in the area of the plant, don't want it there, but there's no place else to put it, and we keep generating more all the time. Another interesting point is, before Mid-American finally decided to pull the plug on this, proposal. They had 2 sites in Iowa identified, one in southwest Iowa and one in Muscatine County near the town of Wilton.
Right.
And the folks in Wilton really got organized and got energized, bad pun maybe, that to oppose siting a nuclear plant there, and they really dug into the facts and became opponents of nuclear power for all the right reasons.
Right.
And it's interesting because a lot of these folks were Tea Party people, and they even got their conservative Republican legislators to understand that nuclear power is dangerous and dirty, and
yeah, and I mean, again, getting Walmart, being on the same page as Walmart is interesting, and having the Tea Party on board as well, very interesting. But let me ask you this: again, given the combination of fiscal concerns, environmental concerns, safety concerns, I mean, is nuclear power? I mean, we're reading an obituary today on Mid-American's nuclear power plant, but what about the nuclear industry in general? I mean, Germany has ixnayed any expansion. They're going to decommission the plants they have. Do you think, where are we at in this country in terms of the future of nuclear power? Is it done, or we still have battles on our hands?
I think it's unsure because the nuclear industry wants to keep building. The NRC last year or so permitted 2 nuclear plants in Georgia and then one in South Carolina. But at the same time, in the past year or less, 4 nuclear plants have closed.
Right.
One in Wisconsin, one in Florida, one in California, San Onofre, and I just heard that Bellefonte in Alabama is closing. And I'm representing the Iowa Sierra Club in trying to close down the Fort Calhoun plant in Nebraska.
Yeah, on the Missouri River.
Yeah.
The one that got flooded really badly in 2011.
Right, and then they had a fire.
And it was closed for over a year, I believe, right?
Yeah.
I always thought that was interesting. People say, well, wind power is not reliable. The wind stops blowing and you can't generate. Well, here we have a nuclear power plant that closed down for over a year. How reliable is that?
Well, it's been over 2 years now.
Okay, over 2 years, yeah. Okay. Double the unreliability that I...
Yeah, exactly. And that's a point that Avery Levins makes a lot, that even in the best of circumstances, a regular power plant, whether it's nuclear, whether it's coal, whether it's gas, is going to be down at certain times for repair or for refueling with nuclear plants or whatever it might be. And that's no different than wind. And the point is, if you have a good transmission system, a good transmission grid, you can pull that power from renewable sources wherever it is.
Well, one last question, Wally. What do you say to folks who, I mean, here we have Walmart, the Tea Party, and you and I on the same page, and some of our more typical friends, in my case, Bradshaw. I mean, Bradshaw, my fellow talk show host, we usually agree. We usually come at stuff from a more liberal perspective. He was very solidly in favor of nuclear power. You've got folks on our side on most issues who believe that nuclear power is a safer and cleaner alternative to coal, oil, and gas, and thus something we should be pursuing. What do you say to that crowd?
I say that their focus is too narrow. They're just looking at, well, there are clean emissions coming out of the plant as opposed to coal or gas. But you have to look at the whole picture, and with this nuclear waste, with the mining of the uranium, with the danger, it just is not a better alternative. We can get every bit of energy we're ever going to need from renewable sources and energy efficiency if we just put our mind to it and really develop those sources. And we really haven't done that as well as we should. We're starting to a little bit, but there's just such a force to keep the status quo.
Yeah.
It's hard to overcome that.
Well, again, great success here in Iowa, and I really, really appreciate your part in it. Appreciate the work of the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. and Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility as well. I don't think we haven't been able to land John Rocco. He could be stuck at an airport. He's often in such a predicament. So, Wally, I want to thank you, and we're going to switch gears to a conversation about the cost of the weather disasters. I mean, speaking of energy, folks, there are all sorts of reasons why we need to be looking at alternatives, and the impacts of climate change are certainly among them. And 2012 was a pretty impressive year in terms of the amount of money we've had to spend on disaster cleanup relevant to weather events. We're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. Jim LaRue has agreed to stick around with us here, and we're going to shift to that conversation. Again, Wally, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
I want to again thank the $1 Million Marathon for sponsoring this segment of our show. Again, check out more about the $1 Million Marathon at Coast to Coast for Cancer. It's a project of above and beyond cancer, and well worth taking a look at. I think they may even have a few slots open if you want to run a marathon as part of this 160 marathon relay run. Again, I want to thank Max Wellman and his trio for providing music for the show. Tally's Restaurant, Bar, and Catering, another one of my business supporters. Give them a shout, folks, and check out their fantastic menu up in Beaverdale. And again, remind you, if you've got pets that need attention, and what pet doesn't, especially if it's a cat, give Kim Holding a shout at Story County Veterinary Clinic in the on Highway 30 between Ames and Nevada. More information about that and all my business partners on the Fallon Forum website, fallonforum.com. We'll be back, and we're going to shift gears to talk a little bit about climate change, about weather, about flooding, about the cost, and about how the trends are almost, you really can't, if you don't see the trend, you aren't paying attention.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershot.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me. But is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
Enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
at me bouncing around in my chair. What am I doing? Hey, Mary McAdams. Mary McAdams is one of our delightful local musicians. Check her out. She's got a MySpace. You know, I think the only people who still use MySpace are musicians, but it's a good resource for that. Check out Mary McAdams on MySpace. And again, I want to thank Gateway Marketing Cafe for also sponsoring this segment of our show. And remind you, if you like what we're doing, support the businesses that make this possible. Community CPA and Associates. Yingsa has grown that firm, accounting and tax firm, to be the 10th largest in the state. Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling. Well, he may not be the 10th largest, but he's been doing this longer than anybody I know. I think like 32 years. Give him a shout regarding furnaces, of course, but more appropriately this time of the year, your air conditioning unit. Also, Hawk Restaurant at East 5th and Walnut. Hawk Restaurant is a great place for sampling Iowa produce, Iowa meat, dairy products. The owners get about 90% of what they serve from Iowa farms. Jim LaRue has graciously agreed to stick around the studio and talk with us about another issue. 2012. It was the second costliest year on record for weather and climate disasters. All right. Now, you remember 2011. 2012 had 11 separate weather and climate events that each had losses exceeding $1 billion. And that follows 2011, of course, which was a record of 14 separate billion-dollar disasters. I don't know how people can look at what's happening and not think, oh my gosh, we have a problem here. And again, once you recognize the problem, you have to start asking, well, how do we afford to continue to pay for this? $110 billion is what this cost us last year. How do insurance companies, deal with this? You're an attorney, Jim. I know you've represented folks involved with insurance claims on weather disasters. You were involved with the people who were recovering from the straight line winds that roared through Tama and Benton County a couple years back. And what we're seeing now is it makes those look like a little zephyr on a calm summer afternoon. This stuff is getting worse and more dramatic and more costly.
Yes, the issue is directly related to some of that which we were talking about earlier in the program. That is, the environment is reacting to the fact that we are putting too many gases into the environment that have a way of trapping heat and changing the global temperature. And when that happens, there are a number of different effects, and it's dispersed, and they're mostly severe. That is, in some cases, this can result in unprecedented heat waves and a baking. Right. In other places, what happens in the Midwest, we'll have a different experience. One is that you have so much energy in the atmosphere, you're going to have more of these high-intensity wind events, whether they're tornadic, right, straight-line winds or tornadoes, or with each incremental increase in the temperature of the atmosphere, its ability to absorb water and vapor, it goes up not linearly but exponentially. So the number of times that we're going to have these huge, either large-scale floodings or these torrential downpours that are even in a small area but having devastating effects, these are going to be a part of what we face going forward in our lifetimes. And then the question is, both at a public policy level and then as individuals, are we in a position to respond to that in a way, one, in a preventive way? What can we do so that if it happens, we're not so severely affected? Right. But two, what do we do when we are severely affected, both as a matter of public action and then as a private matter with our own insurance companies? Yeah, these are going to be repeated events.
Yeah, and how, I really don't know how we pay for this as it continues to get worse and worse.
Well, let's try to frame it in a way that allows an expenditure look less like a cost and more like an investment.
Right.
It's been dizzying to me in these last 10 years how we have, as a nation, been summoned to march off into distant places and do community building exercises. And yet when we have these catastrophes here at home, it seems that we are often caught by surprise and our response is oftentimes not unified, and we're not in a position where we're making things necessarily better. Right. What if we frame this as sort of the domestic battle of our lifetimes, that is anticipating and responding to disasters? These are like war zones. We do a lot in my law practice, a lot of insurance policy holder representation. So in the last couple of years, I've been in Joplin, Missouri. I've been in
that must have been horrible to see.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama. These are places that look like they've been hit by bombs. And it's the energies that are there are equivalent to the bomb. They don't have the radioactive remains, but they affect people's lives in the same way. Right. Well, we respond to war fronts in certain rebuilding ways. We describe what we're doing in certain ways. We don't have the same vocabulary that is here. So on the one hand, on the public expenditure side, we ought to, in a unifying way, say, we're going to rebuild this and do it better. We're going to have standards when we rebuild. So that what if we were building new buildings that still were not energy efficient, which is what we're doing in many places. There's no building code that requires.
Or rebuilding in floodplains where we really shouldn't be putting structures at all.
That would be another kind of response. We can be using these catastrophes as a moment to rebuild America in a much better way and create a vocabulary for ourselves in a technical capacity. Every time you build a building in an energy efficient way with best designs, you're training a generation of architects, builders, craftsmen who know how to do it. And when the disaster is behind, you have a whole group of people who are ready to build the next generation of buildings. On the other hand, if what you're just doing is rebuilding the same old way, we haven't learned much. And these kinds of opportunities are in front of us.
Now Jan Glendinning, she's the director for the Nature Conservancy here in Iowa. She had an interesting letter to the editor today, a fairly long one. It's almost long enough to be an opinion piece. She says that for every dollar we spend on flood mitigation, we save $4 in future damages.
Well, wisely spent. That's true, but we have to continually tell ourselves why we are doing this. One of the heartbreaking things, and I think it's because we don't have civic and political leadership yet that uses a vocabulary that is shared. One of the heartbreaking things about these disaster areas, some of which I was just describing, and we've seen some of it in our own communities, Cedar Rapids, for example.
Right.
At the moment that it happens, there are no better people that you'd want than Iowans helping each other during that immediate response. The adrenaline is flowing. People are altruistic. They go and they help their neighbor. But it doesn't take long, unfortunately, for people to be dividing themselves.
Right.
And then say, that's not me, or that person shouldn't have built in that floodplain. There's some kind of moral lesson that person should learn. Right. We begin to divide ourselves.
Yeah.
And
it seems to be human nature, which I think we have to rise beyond if we're going to effectively deal with the new climate era and all the challenges it's throwing
we
at
need
us.
to have a way to talk to ourselves that it makes sense. So even if we aren't the one who's adversely affected, we're supporting policies that make sure we don't make the same mistake twice.
Well, one thing, Jim, the Great March for Climate Action, this is an event that we've been talking a lot about on this program because, yours truly is helping to organize it, but this will be an effort to move 1,000 people across America, basically moving a city across America over the course of 8 months, showcasing sustainable technologies, renewable energy, lifestyle changes, as we begin to try to raise the consciousness in this country about the importance of taking this issue more seriously. So hopefully that'll be a contribution we can make to move us forward.
You never know what's going to work. If it's only looking backwards that these things seem remarkable to me. Think of those moments that changed history and civil rights. It was young school children in Birmingham, Alabama, because they couldn't find anyone else, marching across a civic square and being attacked by police dogs. That changed the world's perception of how we were in race relations, and it changed Americans' view of themselves. We better do something different because this is awful. Who's to know what might work? I give you credit for trying. I hope it works, but you don't know. You just got to do something sometimes.
Do it. Yeah. Well, back in the civil rights struggle, that 5-day march from Selma to Montgomery was pivotal in terms of helping to move the dialogue forward on the Civil Rights Act.
There's something very moving about collectively
moving.
moving. And it is something moving about it's something about the humans. Not only those who are doing it, they are changed by it, but others watching it happen. That somehow we respond to that as a political moving force.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for sticking around and talking with us about this issue as well.
You bet. Well, good luck with your program. The first time I've been in your studio.
Yeah. Well, I can't call it a new studio anymore because we've been here for over a year now. now.
Well, very good. Good luck to you in all your programs.
Thank you, Jim. Again, I want to thank Gateway Marketing Cafe for sponsoring this segment of our show. They are my anchor business supporter, and I really am very grateful for their support for what we're doing here. I also want to thank Tally's Restaurant Bar and Catering. Jim and I have been to Tally's before. If you have not been to Tally's, you should do that. Great restaurant and also a great supporter of alternative media. Again, our Newton supporters, Dan Kelly's Real Estate Industry. I love using the word industry with Dan Kelly in the same. It's a business, and it's growing, and he's doing good work. You should check him out if you have any interest in Newton at all. And also Diana's Wedding Cakes, also based in Newton. I want to thank my producer, the glorious, the illustrious, the hardworking, the soon-to-be wed Maddie Kane. Oh, Maddie Arrington. I can call you Maddie Kane starting, July, I suppose. All right. And I want to thank Webcast One Live for providing this studio space. I want to remind you about the upcoming Immigrant March here in Des Moines this Saturday. We have been promised a 99% chance of good weather. It begins at 1 o'clock down at East 15th and Grand. Good event, important issue. I also want to thank the Great March for Climate Action and the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club and Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility for being our nonprofit program sponsors. I will be back on Monday.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.